Alright, so let's go ahead and get into Andrew Jackson's policies and what he actually did as president. Now, probably the thing that he's best known for is removing the Indians that were in the eastern part of the United States today, western part of the United States at the time, or kind of in the middle part actually after we had the Louisiana Purchase, and moving them west of the Mississippi River. A lot of this focus on the so-called 5 civilized tribes, the Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, and the Cherokee, those that are in the southeastern part of the United States. The Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw being in the Alabama, Mississippi region, and some into Georgia. The Seminole mainly in Florida, and the Cherokee in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Excuse me. These natives had kind of seen their future in the United States by playing by the rules, kind of becoming American citizens and blending in as best they could. They started wearing European-style clothes, Christianizing, farming in the European manner, all these different things to kind of fit in. They believed that if they looked, talked, acted like Americans, they would start to be recognized as Americans. Their land wouldn't be taken from them. They would be respected. A lot of this also dealt with participating in wars for the United States against the British, in which probably the natives' interests might be harmed and protected in doing that. But they thought they were building kind of a little cachet. They thought they were building something here with America, but there's still a little bit of tension about that land that they had, because these plantations are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, plus they're not rotating their crops, so their land's getting less and less fertile, which means those plantations got to move west into native lands. Also in the northeastern or the northwestern part, the Ohio area again, you got the Ottawa, the Chippewa, the Potawatomi, who are also going to be moved. Now, the idea of moving these natives west of the Mississippi River, for the white Americans, the reason is really clear. It's the farmland. It's the land. That is America's. We were given it by the British at the end of the Revolutionary War. If you're not, we're just going to move you. For Jackson and others that actually have to figure out a way to have this a peaceful ending, he's going to write letters and make these treaties sound as if this is to protect native culture. Right? That as the tide of white kind of settlement is pushing in, natives' culture is breaking down. So this is a way to move west of the Mississippi River onto a reservation. You'll never be harmed again. You'll never be impacted again. You can preserve your culture. Right. Which is kind of enticing. And a lot of these tribes already had started the process of moving further west. Some small groups of the Cherokee had already started moving to the Arkansas and Oklahoma areas. So it wasn't outrageous to that. Now in 1830, at Jackson's encouragement, Congress is going to create the Indian Removal Act, which is going to give the president the power to prepare the natives for removal to the west. He can make these treaties, sign them to say, hey, this is what you get if you move to the west. This is what we're going to give you. This is how large your reservation is going to be. This is how much money we're going to give you for provisions. This is how much money we're going to give you for education. This is how much better your life's going to be if you just move to the Indian Territory. Those that remain behind would have to become citizens. Tribes could only maintain their own government and their own kind of organization if they moved to the west. If they stayed behind, they were American citizens, and that's it. You'd have to submit. Now, Worcester versus Georgia, the Cherokees are going to fire back in the most American way ever. They're going to sue. What's happening here is the state of Georgia is actually trying to take their land. Georgia believes that that land is in their state. They should determine who gets it and how it's used. The Cherokee, though, claim a treaty with the United States government, and claim that the U.S. government are the only ones that they can make a treaty with them because they are an independent nation. According to the U.S. government, that is exactly right. The U.S. government is the only ones that can make a treaty or break a treaty with a native nation. So, but they still have to have the court case brought. They're going to get a Christian missionary that lived among the Cherokee named Samuel Worcester. He's going to bring a suit in federal court against Georgia to stop these land seizures. And he takes it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, yeah, you're exactly right. Georgia has no right. They can't break a treaty with the Cherokee, since the Cherokee are a foreign nation within the United States. Only the U.S. government can do that, and the U.S. government has done nothing to move the Cherokee. Jackson is supposedly infuriated, and I have a feeling he definitely was, but the words he used have been misquoted, more than likely. The misquote is that John Marshall, who is still the Supreme Court's Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Well, that's not exactly what he said. He essentially said that John Marshall has made his decision and is still stillborn, meaning that it has no force. It's like a baby who never even lived, who never even breathed breath. But the point is still there. Hey, the Supreme Court can say what they want to, but hey, Georgia, I'm not going to be sending any armies to stop you moving the Cherokee. So what he's going to do is he's going to speed up this process to try to get the natives west of the Mississippi. For the Cherokee, it's going to happen after he's out of office, but the policies are already set there. So during Jackson's administration, remember he takes office in 1828, so 1832 is 4 years after that. That's right around that election. The Chickasaw moved, the Choctaw moved in 1830, the Creek moved in 1832. The Seminole are going to move. There's going to be some fighting, the Second Seminole War here, where they're going to be trying to prevent having to leave, but most of them are going to be rounded up and sent west of the Mississippi River to Oklahoma. And then the Cherokee are going to be the last ones, and that's going to start in 1835, where they're going to be starting to move into the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears is very harsh. One of the reasons is that most are going to be traveling at the worst time to travel. In the middle of the winter, they're going to start this journey. So this still has a big impact, especially in the state of Oklahoma today. A lot of people remember Andrew Jackson as a butcher, as almost causing a genocide, is really how his name is viewed. A lot of people will not even use a $20 bill because his face is up there. All right, spoil system. A little bit happier note. Let's get into the spoil system. Jackson takes office in 1828. Actually, in 1829 is when he's taken office. And he's going to revolutionize how government jobs are given out. One of the things that he's done during his campaign is he's really kind of focused on trying to get as much support from as many people as possible. And one of the things that he is not below doing is promising government jobs to them. The only issue, though, is when he takes his presidency, it's not like everybody's just kind of quitting their jobs. So he has to fire people. He has to fire qualified people who are experienced at their jobs, who are possibly really good at their jobs. He's firing them. 919 people are going to be replaced in his first days. 10% of the federal government are going to be kicked out of office. And he's going to replace them with, who knows? We may have just put somebody in charge of collecting taxes in Tennessee who can't put two and two together. Right? The reason why they got their job isn't because they were qualified. It was because they had supported Andrew Jackson, and political support during this time would be writing letters, getting as many people excited about the Andrew Jackson campaign as possible, and possibly, just like today, a little bit of money goes a long way. So the next thing And that's going to stay with us until the late 1800s. We're not until we have the Pendleton Act is that policy going to be reformed. Now, Jackson's going to defend it as kind of getting more people involved in the government so that they're increasing in democracy and you're giving everybody a shot. Other people are going to say, yeah, you're just paying off your political cronies. The other big thing that's going to hit Jackson's presidency is the Nullification Crisis. And this all has to do with the tariff in 1828. The tariff, what it does is it artificially raises the price of imports so that American goods are not going to be harmed by foreign competition. The problem is Southerners have been buying foreign goods for one specific reason. They are trading their cotton for those goods, so they've had to buy these foreign goods to kind of maintain that trade. Now, making these goods more expensive is not something that Southerners are going to like, right? Because what they're going to have to do is they still have to pay that raised price, whether they buy it from a northern factory or whether they buy it from a foreign country, which they've kind of pledged their economic kind of existence with. So what's happening is to keep northern people in jobs, the South has to pay the tab. A lot of Southerners are upset about this. Now, Now, with a lot of things during this time, it comes back to slavery. One of the big things that Southerners are importing a lot of is British textiles. Why? Because it's cheap. Why? Because they have to clothe a lot of slaves. Now, you've just increased the price to do business in a plantation economy. That's going to cause some problems as well. All right, tariff abominations, just to kind of point out how bad it is, it's a 60% tariff on imports. So if it cost $10 for, let's say, a jacket, right? If it came from England, that magically went up to $16. Right? That's how bad this tax is for somebody who's trying to buy that. Andrew Jackson, he personally opposes it. He's a Southerner. He's a plantation owner. He does not like this idea, but he believes as president now, he is duty-bound to uphold it. Now, everybody else in the country still thinks Andrew Jackson hates the tariff of abominations and is going to try to tear it down any way he can. His vice president definitely feels that way, and he fiercely opposes the tariff. Calhoun, he's from South Carolina. He does not like this tariff not one bit. It's like green eggs and ham. Not going to pay this tariff. Not on a boat, not on a ship, not in a tree, not on a fence. He's not going to like this tariff. To kind of illustrate this and how tense it gets, these three guys are at a dinner. Robert Hayne is a South Carolinian who definitely does not like this tariff. And for the past months, he's been in this big debate on the Capitol grounds with a northerner, Daniel Webster, about states' rights and sovereignty and power of the federal government, kind of like that Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton debate again. And Robert Hayne gets up to the center party and gives a toast to the union of the states and the sovereignty of the states. Jackson fires back, our federal union must be preserved, sir. And everybody's awkward. And then the vice president stands up and says, the union next to our liberty most dear. So it's creating tensions between Southerners who are not seeing Jackson necessarily as the protector of what they believe in. It's definitely causing a rift between Jackson and his vice president, Calhoun. So much so that later Calhoun's going to be dropped from the ticket. Right, the next time that Jackson goes into a presidential election, Calhoun's dropped from the ticket. Calhoun is quite fine with that. He goes back to South Carolina and writes a little book called The South Carolina Exposition and Protest, which basically lays out states' rights and why they're not going to pay this tariff and why the federal government can't make them pay this tariff. And, oh yeah, if you try to make if you try to make us pay this tariff, we're going to secede. You kind of see how that comes back with South Carolina a little later with the Civil War. But it's getting to the height where it looks like South Carolina might break away from the Union, and if that happens, we've got a civil war. So the tariff of 1832, supported by Jackson and a lot of people, is going to reduce the tariff down a little bit, but still not enough for Calhoun and those from South Carolina. Right. It looks like there's going to be a war. And then Congress is going to authorize the Force Bill, which is going to give Jackson the option of using military force to make sure this tariff is paid, which is only going to get us closer to war. A South Carolinian who's in Washington, D.C. at the time is going to ask Jackson if he had anything he wanted to say to the people of South Carolina. And he said, yes, actually I do. And let me read it right here for you. And I actually have it quoted right here. Yes, I have. Please give my regards and say to them that if a single drop of blood shall be shed there in opposition to the laws of the United States, I will hang the first man I can find engaged in such a treasonable conduct upon the first tree I can reach. Shots fired. And knowing Jackson's ability to fight, and knowing that this guy has fought duels before and will use the military to kind of get this tariff brought in, South Carolinians are a little on edge. It looks like there's going to be a fight. But there is going to be a version to this crisis. There's going to be a compromise that's going to weaken Southern anger, and it's going to provide a safety valve. South Carolina can back down but say, hey, we stood up to the federal government and they backed down. They weakened the tariff. And the United States can put the tariff crisis down without actually having to shoot anybody, which is always good. Another major thing, and I know this video is going to be a little bit longer than the other ones, but I want to go ahead and get it done with this one. All right, the bank war. The other thing that's going to dominate Jackson's administration is the bank war. He hated the Bank of the United States. Its charter, it had a 25-year charter. It's going to have to be renewed in 1836. The Whigs are going to try to make it a campaign issue in 1832, and Congress is going to vote to recharter the bank early. Jackson says, not so fast. I'm going to veto that. And when he vetoes it, Congress doesn't have enough votes to overturn his veto. So the Bank of the United States is going to die, which then is going to have the problem of where do we send our money if we're not putting it in the Bank of the United States? Who's going to regulate how much paper money is out in the system? How are we going to run an economy if we don't have the Bank of the United States? We've had it for so long. But since this is a campaign issue, a lot of people like Jackson's ideas, and he's going to win in a much larger landslide this time. All right. But the effects of the bank war, his popularity is going to fall during his second administration. These pet banks, he's going to set up small state banks which the United States government's money is going to be given to and kind of lent out, and they're going to be able to kind of control the economy through those state banks. Each of them is going to have their own kind of deal. They're going to be lending out money at different rates. They're going to be printing different currency. And we've got kind of haywire in the system. So much so that the federal government's even getting a little concerned. So they're talking about, if you're buying government land out west, we're not accepting those paper bills from those small state banks anymore. You got to pay gold or silver to get that land. And when they do that, people freak out. They don't want that paper money from those state banks anymore, so that money stops circulating, and they're trying to hoard and trying to get their hands on gold and silver wherever they can, and that causes a panic 1837, one of the first severe recessions that we're going to have in the country's history. So Jackson's reputation is kind of sullied because of this bank war. Another thing not connected to the bank war is going to be Jackson is going to be the first president to have an assassination attempt on him, or at least the first one that we know of. There could have been other ones that have never even come really close to happening. January 30th, 1835, there's going to be this guy named Richard Lawrence. Andrew Jackson is attending the funeral of a congressman at the Capitol, and as he's walking out, Richard Lawrence is going to take 2 pistols out of his coat, aim both of them at Jackson, try to fire. Both of them were in a jam. They misfire. It's probably because it was really humid that day. And he is going to, I mean, that's kind of really embarrassing. Right? Both of your pistols just misfired. Jackson, the story goes that Jackson actually takes his cane and starts beating this guy over the head with his stick. And actually, his guards actually have to hold him off of Richard Lawrence rather than the assassin off of him. Richard Lawrence was a house painter, and he was kind of crazy. He thought the U.S. government owed him a large sum of money, and that if he shot the president, the U.S. government would just give him the money. And he also thought he was due this money because he was the rightful king of England. There will be a trial, and obviously he's going to be committed. This is kind of one of the first times that not guilty by insanity is used. Right? Now, Jackson will retire in 1837. He'll go back to the Hermitage and take that back over. He's going to be unpopular at first because of that panic. And he's going to continue to push for this country to keep together. Meanwhile, North and South are trying to split apart. So much so that actually in 1861, when the Civil War actually does finally happen, there are people wishing that Jackson was still alive because they believe he was the only person strong enough to hold this country together. And he will die of accumulated ailments, including tuberculosis and heart failure. I'm trying to remember the year on that. I believe it's 1843. But yeah, tuberculosis and heart failure. Now, the legacies and the continuing controversy over Jackson. Was he a Democratic president? He had the backing of a lot of people, especially the common people, but the way he governed was much more authoritarian than a lot of other presidents before. He used the veto more than any president did before, actually the first time. He was a slave owner, and he's going to be hit on this idea that he was selling slaves down the river. And the controversy over states' rights is going to be a big thing with him. With the tariff, the Nullification Crisis. Indian removal was a huge controversy surrounding Andrew Jackson with his removal of the 5 civilized tribes. And we've already talked about the use of presidential power. Was he a tyrannical ruler or a democratic president? And then the kind of most recent one is with the redesign of the $10 bill, where Alexander Hamilton has kind of moved to prepare for a woman-owned American currency, which should happen by 1920. People were considering, hey, Alexander Hamilton's a pretty good guy. Why is he not going to be so prominent on bills? While Andrew Jackson, which we don't like, is still in the 20. So those are the controversies around Andrew Jackson. I'll leave it up to you whether you think he's a stand-up guy, a Democratic president, or whether you think he was a tyrannical whatever. Hey, that's the beautiful thing about history. You can have those debates all day. But we don't have all day, so I'm closing it down right now. We'll be on to Manifest Destiny next.